Every January, buyers are lured by clearance prices on sailboats, told by brokers that only the smart act before the thaw. But the truth is chilling. Survey tools that are meant to prove your hull is sound become useless in the cold, and a frozen core fools every test. You do not just risk overpaying, you could unknowingly buy a $50,000 disaster disguised as a bargain. Why does winter turn your best protection into a blindfold? And what critical rule must you demand before you ever sign the check? January brings a certain kind of sales pitch that is hard to ignore. The broker's voice is warm, almost confidential. He says the owner does not want to pay another season of storage. He is motivated. This is your chance to make a deal before the spring rush. The price on the listing drops overnight, $100,000 slashed to $85,000, with a note, winter clearance, price to move. There is always a reason to act fast. We have other buyers interested, the broker says. If you wait until April, the price goes back up. Serious buyers move now. The pressure is not subtle. It is woven into every call, every email. The seller is carrying storage and insurance through the winter, they remind you. He will take a low offer if you can close before the next invoice hits. But there is a catch, and it comes dressed as a favor. The boat is fully winterized and on the hard. We cannot run the systems or do a sea trial until spring, but you are welcome to come take a look. It was running perfectly when it was put away last fall. The inspection on offer is visual only. Walk the deck, peek into the cabin, maybe tap the hull with a knuckle. No engine started, no water through the pipes, no sea trial. You can always test everything once it is launched, they say. That is why it is discounted. If you ask for a full survey, the answer is the same. This time of year, all we can really do is a visual inspection. We do not de-winterize for one buyer. The price reflects that. The urgency is not just about moving inventory. For brokers, every boat that stays through the winter racks up yard fees and takes up space for new listings. The faster they clear the lot, the better their numbers look before the spring market. For sellers, every extra month means another bill, $2,000, $3,000, sometimes more, just to keep the boat sitting under a tarp. That pressure flows straight to you, the buyer, wrapped in the promise of a bargain. It all sounds reasonable on the surface, but when the only thing standing between you and a six-figure mistake is a walkthrough in 20-degree weather, it is not a deal. It is a gamble dressed as an opportunity. Some deals simply should not be done, no matter how tempting the numbers look. As a senior marine surveyor, I have spent decades in the yards, boots in the snow, clipboard in hand, watching buyers circle boats that have not seen water since October. Every January, the calls come in. People say, "Can you do a survey this week?" The broker says it is a steal. My answer never changes. I tell them, "I can survey this boat today, but I would be stealing your money." There is a reason for that. When a sailboat sits locked in ice, the very tools meant to protect a buyer become almost useless. The hull might look flawless, the deck might feel solid, but those are illusions created by the cold. Surveyors are taught to state limitations clearly, and when conditions make a proper inspection impossible, to walk away. That is not just caution, it is ethics. Both SAMS and NAMS, the two main surveyor associations, back up this stance. If weather or storage prevents a thorough evaluation, it is our duty to say so, even if it means losing the job. I have seen what happens when that warning goes unheeded. Buyers who trusted a visual-only inspection in February call back in May, angry or heartbroken. The deck that felt rock-hard in January now sags underfoot. The hull that rang true with a hammer now reveals hidden blisters and soft spots. There is no satisfaction in being right after the fact, only regret that someone's savings are now tied up in repairs that could have been avoided. The truth is, a winterized frozen boat hides evidence. Moisture meters, percussion testing, even visual clues, they all lose power in the cold. Any surveyor who tells you otherwise is selling false comfort. If you are being pushed to close a deal before spring, ask yourself, why rush when the only thing you can really inspect is the paint? My job is to protect your wallet, not to rubber stamp a sale that could ruin your boating dreams. Wait for the thaw. That is the only honest advice I can give. A moisture meter is the surveyor's truth detector until the thermometer drops below freezing. In a lab, a saturated sponge sits on a table, water dripping from the edges. The meter's probe touches the surface. The digital display jumps, beeping a warning: high moisture, high risk. Next to it, an identical sponge spent the night in a deep freezer at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The surface is stiff, the water inside locked as ice. The same meter, the same setting, the same pressure. The needle barely twitches. The reading is bone dry. This is not a parlor trick, it is physics. Liquid water inside a fiberglass core acts like a wire, carrying electrical signals the meter detects. When that water freezes, the molecules line up and lock in place. Ice blocks the current. To the meter, the core becomes almost indistinguishable from solid fiberglass. The numbers plummet. A hull that is soaked and rotten at 70 degrees Fahrenheit can read perfect at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The effect is not subtle. At room temperature, a wet balsa panel can peg a Tramex skipper meter deep into the red zone. After a night below freezing, the same panel, still saturated, barely registers. The dielectric constant of liquid water is about 80. Ice is just 3 or 4, almost identical to dry resin. That is why a core full of frozen water can fool even the most expensive meters. The science is clear. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, every reading is suspect. Manufacturers quietly print operating ranges in the manual: 0 to 50 degrees Celsius or 32 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside that band, accuracy is not guaranteed. Some even warn, let the material and instrument reach ambient temperature before testing. On a real boat, the problem gets worse. The outer skin freezes first, especially after a week of sub-zero nights. The meter only sees the top few millimeters, frozen stiff, while deeper inside water may still be trapped in the core, invisible and undetectable. A surveyor can walk an entire deck in January, meter in hand, and report no elevated moisture detected, while rot festers just out of reach. This is not just theory. Surveyor training guides. Worn frozen cores can produce false negatives. Manufacturer support teams confirm readings taken outside the recommended temperature range should be treated with caution. In cold climates, seasoned surveyors flag every reading below freezing as unreliable, and some refuse to meter hulls at all until temperatures rise. The lesson is simple. When the hull is frozen, the meter is blind. A boat that passes every test in January may turn to mush by April. The only thing a moisture meter can tell you in deep winter is the temperature of your own false sense of security. A frozen hull is more than just a surveyor's headache. It's a mask, hiding problems that only reveal themselves when it's too late for a refund. Tap the hull on a January morning and the sound is sharp, almost musical. The structure feels solid, but that's only because the cold has locked every molecule in place. Underneath, water trapped in the core has become ice, immobile, silent, and invisible to every tool in the surveyor's kit. The real danger is not just that a moisture meter gives a false reading, but what that false reading means for the boat's future. A wet core, frozen solid, mimics the stiffness of dry balsa or foam. The deck feels strong, the hull rings true, and any hint of rot or delamination is hidden by the rigidity of ice. The buyer leaves with a glowing report, convinced they have found a structurally sound hull at a winter bargain. But the moment spring arrives and the temperature climbs, that ice melts back into water. The core softens, the bonds between fiberglass and core material begin to fail, and the deck that felt like concrete in January starts to flex and crunch underfoot. Blisters play the same game. In the cold, the pressure inside each blister drops, shrinking them down and making the hull look cleaner and healthier than it really is. As the hull warms, water inside the laminate regains mobility. The pressure builds, and by May, Blisters that were invisible in winter erupt across the surface. Surveyors have seen hulls that looked nearly flawless in February become pockmarked and rough by June, with repair estimates climbing into the tens of thousands. 3 takeaways are non-negotiable. First, frozen hulls can't be trusted, no matter what the meter says. Second, a rotten, soaked core will pass as dry in sub-freezing weather, but fail catastrophically when thawed. Third, blisters and delamination hide in the cold and erupt with the return of warmth, turning a winter bargain into a springtime nightmare. The freeze and thaw cycle is relentless. Every winter, water in the laminate expands, contracts, and works deeper into cracks and voids. Each cycle weakens the bond between skin and core, setting up future delamination. By the time defects become visible, the buyer is on the hook for repairs that can rival the price of a new engine or a full deck replacement. The risk is not theoretical. It's written into the invoices of boatyards from New England to the Great Lakes. When the hull is frozen, the survey is blind, and the buyer is left holding a ticking time bomb. The next blind spot lies just below deck, the hidden dangers inside every winterized system. A diesel engine does not reveal its secrets on a cold January afternoon. On a winterized boat, the block sits cold and silent, drained or filled with antifreeze, every system shut down against the freeze. Brokers will tell you it ran perfectly when laid up. The truth is, you cannot know what is hiding inside cast iron until that engine is hot and under load. Water left behind in a cooling jacket or heat exchanger does not just freeze, it expands by 9%, pushing against metal that was never designed to flex. That force is enough to split a casting, sometimes with a hairline crack so fine you will not spot it until months later. Even a careful winterization can miss a low point or a clogged drain. One overlooked pocket of water, one hard freeze, and the damage is done. In the yard, a mechanic might run the engine for a minute or two on a hose, but that proves nothing. The thermostat stays closed, the block never warms, and pressure never rises. A cracked heat exchanger or block can sit dormant all winter, leaking nothing, showing no symptoms. Only after launch, when the engine is run up to temperature and coolant circulates under pressure, does the hidden crack open up. Suddenly, coolant pours into the bilge or exhaust, or the oil turns milky with water. The real cost appears weeks after the sale. A replacement engine for a 40-foot sailboat can run $25,000 to $40,000, not including labor and alignment. A heat exchanger alone can top $3,000. Every spring, marine mechanics see the same pattern. A boat bought as is in January, launched in April, and back in the yard by May with a catastrophic invoice. The mechanical blindfold of winter does not just hide minor issues, it can conceal the kind of damage that wipes out any savings from a so-called off-season deal. Pink antifreeze in the waterlines is supposed to look like careful winterization, but it is also the perfect excuse for why nothing can be tested. Every freshwater tank, every pump, every hose is filled with recreational vehicle antifreeze, thick and syrupy and bright enough to stain your hands. Brokers will point to it as proof the boat was cared for, but as a surveyor, I see something else. A system that is masked and impossible to check under real conditions. Once a boat is winterized, the plumbing is sealed off from pressure. You cannot pressurize the lines, you cannot run the pumps, you cannot check for leaks at joints or under sinks. Hot water heaters are off, bypassed, or drained, their elements sitting idle. A cracked fitting, a split hose deep in the bilge, a failed accumulator tank, none of these will reveal themselves until the system is refilled and pressurized in spring. Even the smallest crack in a plastic elbow can stay hidden for months, only to spray water the first time you fill the tanks. Survey standards call for a full systems check, but in January, that is off the table. The only thing you can do at a winter survey is open a few lockers, look for obvious corrosion, and hope the previous owner did not cut corners. And yet, too many buyers take the broker's word that the plumbing was perfect when it was put away. The reality is, you are buying blind. If a freshwater pump fails or a leak soaks the cabin after launch, the repair bill can easily top $5,000. That is before you discover what is lurking in the hot water system or behind a sealed panel. When every system is masked by antifreeze, the buyer is left with nothing but faith and a future invoice waiting to be written. In the spring, the phone rings with stories no broker wants to hear. One buyer, a retired engineer from Michigan, closed on a 40-foot cruiser in February. The survey in January showed a flawless deck, bone dry, the report said. By May, after the thaw, every step forward made a dull crunch. The deck flexed underfoot, soft as cardboard. The yard peeled back the fiberglass and found the balsa core black, soaked, and rotting across 20 feet. The repair invoice landed at $41,300, line by line. Labor, new core, resin, gel coat, hardware rebedding. The buyer's savings, once earmarked for a cruising fund, vanished into a project he never saw coming. Another call came from Connecticut. This buyer had insisted on a professional winterization record and a quick cold start in the yard. The engine turned over, no smoke, no warning. 2 months later, at launch, the diesel boiled over within minutes. Coolant poured into the bilge. A mechanic split the block and found a hairline crack running the length of the cylinder wall, evidence of water left behind, frozen, and expanded. The replacement bill was $29,800 for a new engine, mounts, and labor. The buyer had held back $2,000 in escrow. The engine alone cost 15 times that. Each story ends the same way, a winter deal turning into a spring disaster with invoices that read like cautionary tales. Run the numbers on a so-called winter deal, and the math turns cold fast. That $15,000 discount the broker promised, it starts shrinking the moment you close. First, the yard bill, winter storage, haul, and spring launch for a 40-foot sailboat routinely total $3,000 or more. That is before you factor in shrink wrap, insurance, or surprise fees. The discount is already down to $12,000 if you are lucky. Now look at the holdback. Most buyers negotiate a small escrow, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, to cover unknowns. But when a cracked block or rotten deck appears in May, the real bills dwarf that cushion. A full deck recore repair can hit $40,000. A diesel repower, labor included, can break $30,000. Even a modest plumbing overhaul can run $5,000. The $1,000 you held back vanishes in a single line item, leaving you on the hook for the rest. Add it up. Storage eats your discount, repairs erase your savings, and the escrow is a rounding error. What looked like a bargain in January is a $50,000 liability by June. The numbers never lie, only the timing does. Right now, thousands of listings promise winter deals, but physics does not negotiate. Moisture meters do not work on ice, and frozen engines keep their secrets until you have signed. With repair costs soaring, deck rebuilds topping $40,000, engines north of $30,000, one gamble on a cold day can erase a lifetime savings. In winter, patience is not caution. It is survival. Drop your thoughts below. Would you risk it?